How are y'all doing today? Good. My name is John Collins. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor and Manager of Aviation Safety Programs for the AOPA Air Safety Institute. And I'd like to welcome you today. They would too. To common Checkride botches as seen by designated pilot examiners. We have a great panel for you. And I've got a bunch of prepared slides. Candidly, we're going to whip through those because I want this to be a discussion and a conversation. I want to have, I'm going to get out into the audience, wander around with my microphone, and have you guys ask our panel questions, and they're going to respond with answers. But let me introduce you to them in case you don't know them. So starting off on my far left is Chris Anderson. He's a DPE out of Milwaukee, right, Chris? How long have you been a DPE?
17 years.
Oh, sorry, 17 years.
Okay, all right.
Not used to this.
Yeah, well, that's all right. And Catherine Cabanero, she's out of the, let me make sure, Nashville FSDO, right? How long have you been a DPE?
About 4 years.
4 years, okay. And you can see on the screens what their areas of specialty or specialties are, and there are a few that are a little. Chris, you and Dave do those guys, right?
That was one of my students.
So our final panelist is David St. George. He's out of the Rochester, New York FSDO and is the executive director for SAFE. Yes, Society of Aviation and Flight Educators. So one of the organizations that is dedicated to enhancing our flight instruction and education. So definitely check them out. I know they've got a booth at the show. Catherine's got the Sewanee Aeronautics, right? No, what am I talking about?
So,
what's the name of your school? I'm sorry.
I run ACE Aerobatic School, which is an aerobatic school, and I'm also starting a new flying school at my home university, which is Sewanee Flying Tigers.
Awesome. All right, so they've got a lot of experience. David, you've been an examiner.
25 years.
25 years, okay. So a lot of experience here. They've seen a lot of things, both positive and negative, and they're here to help you out. Now, a quick survey of the crowd before we begin. How many student pilots do we have out here? Awesome. How many private pilots looking to get an instrument rating? Okay. Anybody working on their commercial? Okay. And ATP? All right. Aspiring CFIs. Who wants to be a flight instructor? Who's working on it? All right, awesome, thank you. And how many flight instructors do we have in the group? Excellent. All right, so this conversation is for all of you, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna hop off the stage here in a moment or two, and we'll start talking about it. But there's a few things that we're gonna take a quick look at. First of all, some general problems that the examiners see on check rides. And we're going to flash that up, and you can read the screen. I'm not going to read it to you. But as we go through this, if there's things that you want to really highlight, some things that are just like absolute showstoppers at the very beginning, go ahead and jump in on that. Please feel free to do that. We're going to talk about some common errors that we see on specific check rides. And then finally, like I said, I'm going to get out and wander around the crowd and do my Jay Leno impression. Poorly, I'm sure, but we'll take care of that. So it is very possible to stop a check ride even before it begins. And you can see on the screen there are a lot of things that can happen with that. What was that? So anything you guys would like to talk about? Yes, go ahead, David.
The one thing, and it's not in that little ACS checklist, there's a checklist in the front of your ACS that's very valuable, and I find people don't read the ACS, but all of your IACRA credentials, make sure you have your FTN, your login, your password, or we go through that little game of back and forth, send me the password, and people just get more nervous.
I'll add, too, that it really helps if the flight instructor can attend the check ride as well, because if you think of Advisory Circular 6165 that has the verbiage for the endorsements, the common common endorsements that I see missing are the ones for the knowledge exam that the instructor has spent that. So if you're familiar with that advisory circular, it's Alpha 1 and Alpha 2, and those are required for almost every practical exam. So it really helps if the CFI can come, because if we're missing an endorsement, then the CFI can go ahead and give that endorsement.
And I will say, I got caught on a check ride that way. I took a student to see the examiner. I left, wandered down the ramp, came back a little while later, wondered why the airplane was still sitting out in front of the FBO, and it was because there was an endorsement missing. Interestingly enough, it wasn't an endorsement I was necessarily responsible for. I did not give him his complex aircraft training, but when he went through his training at the Part 141 school that he attended, for some reason they didn't put that endorsement in his logbook. It was in his training record, and I had to give the endorsement right then and there for his multi-engine check ride. So it can catch you. All right, David mentioned that checklist for in the ACS and the PTS, stuff that you need. There are some things there that can be very helpful for you. And student pilots, how many of you have gone through your maintenance logs? Okay, not a whole lot. Is that common?
It's common, and it's a big problem, yeah. Or the day that they do the check ride, the little tabs that everyone puts on the logbooks, that says annual, 100-hour. One of them fell off, and they're gone. You really want to be familiar with the maintenance logs. It's very valuable. Again, you're trying to preload this and avoid the nervousness, because you want to waltz in there and do everything right, so you get to the point of the oral. So.
Yeah, the maintenance things that I see are mainly with students that come with their own airplane. So for example, if you got a 172, an older one, say a 76, 77, and you've been flying the tail end off this thing, you go over 100 hours. Well, there might be like a seat rail AD that you overflown. That's where I see the problems with individual owners. That gets sticky. And the other thing is you can make a little cheat sheet, because a lot of times those stickers, as they were saying, well, they haven't been updated since the last inspection, but you can come there and just have that little cheat sheet on when the annual is and be able to, there's nothing wrong with having a reference in front of you to make things a little easier when you're picking that stuff out.
Yeah, and the thing he's saying is very important there. The 100-hour might be in effect. The AD, you have to watch those. And you have to have, it says right in the ACS, you got to be familiar with it. And it's not usually covered in the curriculum. Right. People cover it just before the check ride, and
a little tip,
it's not embedded.
A little tip for the flight instructors: all that I do not have these airworthiness directives memorized. But what I do is I start from the back of the logbook, and I work my way forward, and I look for consistency. So an AD showed up here, here, here. Wait a minute, where'd this number come from? And usually you wonder, why wasn't that AD done here? So that's how I catch them. I don't know all these things. I just look for consistency in the previous log entries, and that's how I catch a problem. And you can do that very easily. And the other thing is sit down with a mechanic and review some of these things. Highly recommend, if you've got an A&P, it's even worth paying them an hour of their time to go through and make sure everything's up to date, and another reference to help you find things.
Yeah, and this is the funny thing. It always takes money to get the check ride going. And the modern age, it's like, do you take Venmo, Google Pay? These apps are proliferating like little mushrooms on the internet, and you should just call the examiner and see what they, we're not bashful when you're talking about the payment. We want to know, and get that done quickly without any problems.
The other thing, since we're still on the paperwork aspect of it, I've had a lot of applicants show up with photocopies of their medical certificate. And you've got to have your original with you. And the easiest way to catch that is usually the signatures don't look right. And then you just, is this your original medical? No. Well, where's your medical? It's at home in my safe.
Yeah, no
So-
pistol permits either. Pistol permits don't have an expiration. It has to have an expiration. Could be government, photo, expiration.
And I'll add that a physical copy of the knowledge test is a great idea. Most of the time, we don't need it. But if IACRA is down, it lets us continue with the exam using the paper route. So there's still a good reason to bring your knowledge test.
Well, that's important. That's important. It's yeah. If you can't do it electronically, we've got to go back to the old way of doing it via paper. So that's very important.
8710.
And of course, you want to be sure you're ready. You know, have you met all the training requirements? That's really important. And you guys kind of figure that out early on as you go through and do your reviews, right?
Oh, we see it all the time. Logbook's not signed, no address in the front, done in pencil, doesn't add up. We have, if you've done it long enough, you've seen every version of that. One guy already owned 4 planes. He had, I don't know how many logbooks. His brother was a CFI. He had over 400 hours. He's the guy that brought the pistol permit.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've seen a number of missing training requirements. I had a commercial candidate come to me without having had some of the experience. And, you know, I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't start this Checkride because you need to go back and get that, whatever he was missing. I think it was a cross country of some sort. And he said, well, you know, my instructor should have told me. And here's the deal. Yes, that's true. That instructor should never have signed that candidate off. But as a budding commercial pilot, you know, the regulations are free. They're on the internet. You can look out there too. It's no secret. You should take your own logbook and verify. In fact, it's helpful to us if you go ahead and put some sticky markers near the items that satisfy the experience requirement. It makes it quicker for us to verify that you are in fact able to sit for that exam today. And another note too, it helps if you add up your logbook entries. I'm a mathematician, I can do that, but you want to present the best version of yourself, and having a neat logbook with everything added up just sets the stage, right? It's a piece in the puzzle. So I'd encourage you to do that.
So as pilot examiners, we're required to have a plan of action, and mine has all the requirements for the specific rating that you're working for. And a lot of examiners like myself, we will send out a little short checklist that marches through, okay, where'd you do your long cross country for this? Where was your dual this and dual that? Ask your examiner if they have something like that. Or if not, then you can copy the regulations and just make a short little cheat sheet for yourself, or, speaking to flight instructors there, but even keeping that as part of your training records for your particular student from that. I also noticed a little bit of a trend in some of the less populated areas where flight instructors will enter the date, the time, the aircraft, and sign it, but they won't put a description of the training. And unfortunately for them, we have to go back and recreate that record because there needs to be a description of the training when you're receiving the dual instruction. So I'll see a blank line and it'll say cross country, Janesville to Oshkosh back. Well, and there's nothing over there except the CFI signature. And that all relates back to the specific regulation, under 61, 107, 109, et cetera, or 2729 for the commercial ratings. But so the description of the training has got to be in there. Some flight instructors are also doing stamps instead of their signature. So we need actually a signature, the certificate number, and the expiration date in there. And I know it's being picky, but it's the stuff that we as examiners get reviewed around every year, every 2 years, depending on when our training's coming up.
And what about logging ground instruction? Is that important?
Yes.
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 What do I have to log as a flight instructor? What do I need to log for then?
Well, there has to be, it just says ground instruction. And if you're doing it as an instructor, or if you're looking at it as an applicant, if they write that and they say the regulation such through such, that will cover it. It often gets missed in the higher ratings. You're adding a multi-engine, and there's absolutely never any ground instruction, but it's required. It's in the regulations. So if you've logged flight time for any one of these practical evaluations, you do have to log the ground time. And like Chris said, you know, we are held to this. It's not, we're narcs. The FAA is, our boss is here in the room, I think, and he's watching us. He wants to make sure we do it right. And it's a legal process when you get your pilot's certificate. It's for the rest of your life, for the whole United States, day and night. It's a huge privilege.
Have you ever had somebody show up without an instructor endorsement because the instructor wouldn't sign them off?
I don't think they would admit it. There's always, you know, I'm thinking a percentage where they don't have an endorsement.
I had a recent one, but it was just an error. The this was for a CFII. The logbook and everything was signed off, but IACRA had not been completed. And unfortunately, the day of the check ride, we couldn't track down the flight instructor. So,
Good. How long does it take to do a check ride?
The classic private pilot, you tell them 2 hours on ground, 2 hours in the air, you know, with a little break in between, often works. I did one just last week, and I had never seen such a comprehensive pre-flight, you know, with checking the air pressure in the tires.
Wow. That's
The
good.
pre-flight took 2 hours.
That's good.
We don't rush the applicant, so.
So I think the standard handshake to handshake is usually about 4 hours.
Yeah.
that's what I tell people, but I say it's not a race. You know, it's your check ride. I'm just here to observe. So a lot of people, it takes less time, and some people it takes a little bit more. It's not a race, and I frankly don't care how long it takes. I just want to see you successful.
And I'm reading our little things, not a race. You know, I tell people as far as, you know, the conditions. Is that on another slide, the conditions for the test?
We're coming up to that, yeah.
Okay, everyone wants to test, but, you know, pick a day that's you're comfortable, that meets your personal minimums. I see people, you know, especially in the climate we have where it's so hard to get an examiner, people tend to say, oh, I'm going, I got to do this test. And that's not going to help you because you work very hard, you spend a lot of money. And believe it or not, every good examiner wants you to pass. We're rooting for you. And so make a wise choice. We can't make that choice for you. We can sometimes hint. You know, I don't think you want to go out in that 20-knot crosswind and demonstrate your ability, but make a very good choice. Pick your day.
And don't be forced into the ride. If you're not gonna, if you wouldn't fly in this weather solo, don't go. If your instructor, I've had a school just recently, he needs to get this check ride done, and the winds are up. And I'm just going, I'm getting a touchy feeling. We went, it was not successful. And so, but he was pressured into the ride. Don't take that pressure. Think about it this way, PIC authority. I'm not flying in this. I don't care what my flight instructor said, because he signed me off as a private pilot. I'm making this decision, and I'm fine with it. I would rather take the day off. I've got plenty of other things to do than to go down another path and not be successful. Another thing is a frame of mind. When you come into that, have faith in your training and faith in yourself. One of the things occasionally that I see happen is somebody will say, I'm going to screw this up. And that sends a mindset right there that takes you down a bad path. Don't go there. Think positively. Go, I'm going to do just fine. I'm going to ace this thing, whatever. A little over the top helps that mental psychology in yourself. And don't go down the negative path, please.
And I'll add that everybody is nervous in a check ride. All candidates are nervous. I've taken 11 check rides. I was nervous all 11 times. But if you are really not ready, then it's better to go ahead and reschedule. If you feel like your ground knowledge is not up to snuff, it is better to reschedule that practical exam. I've had some practical exams that didn't end so well, and I asked the instructor, and for you instructors out here, please don't sign anybody off unless you are confident that that person has the knowledge and the skills to pass that exam. So, you know, I've seen some pretty bad practical exams where I had to ask the instructor, you know, do you really think that this person was ready? And a couple of them admitted to me that, well, they just couldn't, they didn't know what to do anymore, so they thought I'd send them up for a check ride, and that's not the way to go. Make sure that you instructors are sending folks up when you are sure that they are ready.
And you guys don't instruct during the exams, correct?
No.
Correct.
That's the easiest way to lose your DPE.
Now, I did have an examiner tell me one time, however, when I took a check ride, if I didn't learn something from him, he didn't do his job well. Is that?
That's absolutely right. And we're required to give 3 briefings. And probably the most important, but the most disregarded, is the one at the end of the evaluation where we say, this went good, this went bad. The point I make in a lot of talks is that when you pass a private pilot test or any FAA evaluation, it means you got a 70%. Doesn't mean you were 100%. There's always a delta of something that you need to learn, and that's time you should be listening. And we brief very carefully. These are the steps you want to take to be safer and better.
Yeah, that debrief part is one of my favorite parts of the exam because it's the feedback loop that helps the flight schools improve what they're doing. And it's always gratifying to me to see the flight instructors who really want to figure out what they can be doing better in imparting this kind of knowledge and skills with their students. So that's certainly a highlight to me of a practical exam.
And all of us are flight instructors. When I'm sitting there, I want to teach, but it's really hard for me to keep my mouth shut and just watch and evaluate. So that, like they were saying, the debriefing part is very important, but we see what's going on, and we're like, please, we want to say something, but I can see it. They can see it in me because they're like, what are you thinking over there?
Well, and I'll tell you, as a
beautiful day.
As a DPE too, that's usually our sign when something isn't going well. That's when I want to teach, it usually means something as a DPE is not meeting the standards, and I get that itchy feeling. And we do have to tell you immediately when something was unsuccessful. And back to Chris's point of don't go down the negative path, pilots are all perfectionists. Things are going to go wrong. They are not going to be perfect. You got to accept that going in. There's going to be pluses and minuses. If you don't hear from the DPE, you're good to go. Put it behind you. Just keep marching forward. That is probably the most important thing, is that positive mindset, and don't, psych yourself out and become negative.
Okay. I'm going to go through this for this. Conduct a thorough pre-flight inspection. We've talked about that. Very important. They are watching. They do want to see what you're going to do.
Have you had one yet with the chocks in?
This is the one we wanted to talk about, choosing the weather. Don't let the weather choose your outcome. So,
and I'm in upstate New York, and it's very difficult. And we're subject to the regulations. And just now, they're starting to kind of go back to what I had when I initially started in the 90s, where you can do an oral and then do the flight test the next day. And that really helps with dispatch. We've had a hard time getting tests done because you need 4 hours of good weather. But if you can get the oral done and do the flight the next day, and so that's starting to be, I don't know, is it?
It's in the proposal.
It's in the proposal. It's close to being. And I'll tell you, as you do this a lot of years, it goes up and down. What's the rules this year? But on your day, yes, you need absolutely weather, as Chris said, that you would fly solo in.
And there's a discussion with personal minimums. A lot of people talk about the personal minimums, but I've had people who will tell me what their personal minimums are on the ground. And actually, I think, now that I think about this, it's more so in my helicopter group. They'll give me a list of personal minimums, but we'll launch into whether that exceeds those personal minimums. And my discussion usually on the cross country is, why did we take off? So a variety of answers from that.
all right. You talked about this, David. You said you will make mistakes. It's going to happen, but drive through them. And I think it's important that you do that. I know I did that on my CFI check ride. And my inspector, as I was taking it with the FAA, he was, said, well, let's talk about this for a moment. I said, well, yeah, here's what I did wrong. If you'll let me, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to show you how it should have been done correctly the first time around. So there's a good way to kind of recover from that if you know.
Yeah, and this young man is taking a CFI evaluation, I think you said, right? ATP, CFI, going there. Yeah, what John said is really important. At that level, if something goes wrong, use it as a teachable moment. That's not how you do it. This is how you do it.
Right.
You just demonstrate that you have the correct knowledge. At the CFI level, when you're taking a Checkride, they're evaluating your ability to teach, not the knowledge or the knowledge certainly, but not necessarily the control. You already proved that in the commercial.
All right, so I'm going to just flash through these slides as I come down off the stage. If you've got questions, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll try to get to everybody, and we'll do it. So there's some stuff about the private pilot. Let me get out here.
Here's where you got to wake up and make us work.
It's pre-launch.
There's
so
no
guys
money. You know, these are DPEs working for nothing. This never happens.
Where's the gentleman back here?
There's one up. Oh.
In regards to the endorsement for ground school, there are so many electronic ways now to get ground school training, very thorough, very carefully written. If your CFI is not really gifted at sitting down and taking you through methodically all of the areas related to ground school, but you've done one of these others that's reputable and certifiable, how do you get that endorsement when your CFI is not really that sit in the room teacher? That is my case, by the way.
I think there's two things. There's the ground knowledge for more so the knowledge test aspect of it, but there's also requirement for some ground training as part of your flight training. So what I do or recommend to some people is usually in your logbook you've got one column that's entirely blank. There's no label on it that says multi-engine or helicopter. Take in there and write ground instruction. Because you know, let's use a cross-country planning, for example. So he's not just going to walk up to the airplane and go, let's go fly. If he is, I would probably have second thoughts about working with that instructor. But just use that column so when he does his pre and post-flight briefings that he can put that time in there as well. And all the logbooks that I look at all have a log in the back that gives you the time and subject matter and the code for writing that stuff as well. But I think I find it more useful if they just take one of those blank columns and put something in there, and that might meet the requirements.
My question is, I believe in the past, CFIs were allowed to ride along with the Checkride. Is that ever going to happen, or?
I don't think so. It's not currently allowed. That did used to be allowed, and also to sit in on the oral, but that doesn't happen now. Interestingly, though, we are very close to video monitoring of Checkrides with the DPE on board or not on board. So things are changing, and they do it daily. I don't know why they took the CFI out of the back seat. I thought that was valuable when I was a CFI to see how a Checkride was conducted. But they change all the time, the policy, but not now.
Other questions?
I was going to say, there is value. When we were allowed to do that, I think they took it away from us because they wanted the security of the test. So, you know, a lot of times instructors would sit down, and in the back of the room, they write down every question that was being asked or what scenario.
Or hand signals.
Hand signals, yes.
The question is, are you allowed to repeat?
The answer to that is no. We cannot let you repeat a maneuver. But, you know, we all as pilots make mistakes, right? And what we're looking for is if you make a mistake, fix it. That's valuable information to see that if you get off your altitude a bit, you fix it, as opposed to not noticing and the problem gets worse. So the verbiage in the ACS is consistently, it's something along the lines of consistently exceeding the tolerances. So if you exceed the tolerances, fix it. that's what we're looking for.
Hey there. Do you have students who are using electronic-only logbooks like for flight, and are there any common mishaps that you've encountered with those?
I have had several candidates use electronic-only logbooks, and I haven't had an issue with those.
For me, I've the same thing. A lot of people, but the issues that I've seen is they don't document the training very well. They may have a signature, and again, they may not say what they did during the particular thing. And when I ask the instructor, he says, "Well, I'm not really that familiar with it." Well, we kind of have to be, because we need to document the training that occurred.
And just so you know, across the board, we're required to take that. You can't say, you can't go to an examiner that says, I only use paper logbooks, I only use paper charts. You can't use that. We have to accept electronic media so long as it's current and you know how to use it, but that would mean you know how to use it. And if I know how to use it better than you, that's not a good sign. We can take things away, though. We can fail things. So, very frequently on my Checkride, the ownership icon goes away. There's no little plane on your iPad. We're not going to just drive the plane on the pink line. It's not a video game. And you do have to demonstrate pilotage, navigation, the basics. I think it even says compass still. The most useless thing in the plane, but you have to have some knowledge of the compass.
So I've been a CFI for about 2 months now, and
Congratulations.
thank you. You guys develop relationships with existing CFIs, and obviously with highly experienced CFIs, they're experienced. Is there some telltale signs between a new CFI and an experienced CFI that you see through the students? If so, what are those gaps?
I'm not sure I can say new versus experienced, but I'd say committed versus maybe not as committed. And if I could just say one quality of a really good instructor that I see is an instructor who's giving scenario-based training. And I can't emphasize it enough. The FAA has that right on the money. Scenario-based training is where it's at. Quick story, a few weeks ago, I gave a private exam, and the oral went fine, and we got in the airplane, and this airplane had been sitting for a good 3 hours, right? And we start up, and the oil temperature automatically pegs on the high end. So it's clearly not correct, right? The gauge is not correct because that oil was not hot. And so the student says, "Oh yeah, it always does that." And so I'm sitting there, and to my horror, we taxi to the runway. And I had to say, okay, it was clear he was about to take off. So that's the difference between rote knowledge, knowing that that is a required piece of equipment, and the ability to apply it. If you only know something at the rote level, it doesn't even matter, right, that you know it. If you can't apply it, it doesn't even matter that you know it at the rote level. So that's a case where I see a CFI has not been giving scenario-based training. There's a scenario that just presented itself that should have been, okay, this is a required piece of equipment, we can't fly today. So I'll tell you, that's my, the big difference is the CFIs who go the extra bit to give, like I say, scenario-based training, or, sorry to embarrass you again, Drew, but I gave this young man, Drew Freeman, his commercial pilot exam a week or two ago, and he does all of his landings power off. And I was really impressed by that because he is always very familiar with the drag qualities and the gliding capabilities of his aircraft. So to me, that's a flight instructor who's really gone the extra step to provide that great instruction of how to fly an airplane, not how to pass a check ride. That's mine. So sorry for the long response there.
All right, just real quick, scenario-based. We're taking an instrument practical exam, and we're shooting an approach, and we're a little bit off on the approach, going back and forth, oscillating. You said we don't repeat maneuvers, but would you accept a go around and start again and not miss on that approach?
I've done a lot of instrument work, and a pilot that misses in that case gets a, or goes missed approach, if they do it properly, gets a gold star. It's just like a go-around on a VFR landing, and I can't tell you how many people get started with a landing. You can see it's going terribly, and they won't go around. But I say, especially on the IFR ride, there's a lot less simulation. We want to see if you're unstabilized, not configured, something goes wrong, ATC throws you a curve at the last minute, be pilot and command and say, no, I'm taking this around. And, that's a good CFI is always training their people that way, because we're not training for the test. We're training for real life. And especially at the instrument level, the real test is not the evaluation. The real test is after you get the certificate and you fly in the clouds. That's really, we're looking for safety ultimately. So, great question.
So I was thinking, you guys have talked a lot about aircraft maintenance and different things related to, do you have these documents? And you're just talking about someone who basically busted a check ride because they showed up with an airplane with a weird oil pressure gauge. So my airplane, like whenever you set takeoff power on the runway, the oil pressure pegs for a little while, or definitely goes into the yellow. But then as soon as you set climb power, it's fine. And we know that like the A&P for the club has said that's fine. My CFI has said that's fine. Things like that. Like, how do you handle? Is that a bust, or like how does that get handled during a check ride?
I would definitely brief the examiner that has something that will happen. It's been examined by a professional and approved. I would say in the yellow's fine, but if it's going in the red and staying there, nobody's happy. So,
yeah, if you're exceeding a limitation, if it goes into the red, something's not right. And I get that a lot. The mechanic says it's fine. Like, well, that's a limitation. What part of exceeding a limitation is fine? So, it happens. We see it. Some people will say, oh, that's normal, and we do a little bit more research ourselves.
I'll just say a couple things quick. Obviously, I'm with SAFE. We do have an app called SAFE Toolkit, and on there is, and it's free. It's on the Apple and Android, and it has a part that says Checkride Ready. I wrote the blog, it's like avoiding pink slips, and they're not pink anymore, but no one wants to go in that test and fail. So it's just got advice like this. I'd highly recommend it for you. More questions, guys. This is your chance to put us on the spot.
Ask
this is
the tough ones.
You giving us orals.
Oh, here we go. From outside the fence. That's all right.
If you have a mechanical problem, isn't it, what do you call it? It's not a fail, right? You just have to do what you haven't done yet?
You're talking about a discontinuance if we have an issue? Yeah. Yeah, if it's something that the applicant discovers, okay, we're done, let's take it back in, we'll just discontinue and pick it up next time with another airplane or something like that.
And does everyone know what a discontinuance is? If you get a good briefing, you have three choices. You pass, or you're going to get more training and you need to retest. But you can also, at any point in the test for health or mechanical or weather, you can discontinue. You can time out the test. We'll do this at another time, and there's no penalty for that. So we want to see you be pilot in command and make those good decisions.
Once you start the exam, you have 60 days in which to finish that. And if you don't finish it, then it's a brand new practical exam.
I know her.
I have a question for you. Recently, when I got my commercial, I was advised by my DPE that the FAA might contact me to give a review on your DPE. And I was wondering if you ever had that happen.
Yep.
My last name is St. George, and there was a guy just south of us in Pennsylvania, Mark George, who falsified 300 practical tests. And everyone had to go back, so every one of my tests gets reviewed because it's David St. George. No, the seed is very common, and it's a quality control, and none of us mind that. All the good examiners want to do things exactly right and come look at us. And yeah, it's very common. There is quality control built into this system. And, you know, I hate to admit it, but there's some examiners you probably don't want to fly with. Hopefully they pluck them out of the system.
Yeah, it's nothing to be fearful on your end. They're very basic questions. They lead you, I think one of them, I don't know if they still use it, but one of them was a scenario with the engine failure. Where are you going to make the field that you were going to land in? You know, well, if you think about it, you know, your answer was, did we evaluate to you reaching that point? And it's not a big deal. They're very nice about it. You don't have to sit there and go, oh, they're going to come and take my pilot certificate, but just ask them truthfully.
Other questions? Yep.
I've always wondered, is it a good idea to somehow meet a DPE, like at a fly-in or something like that, and get to actually know them like human to human, and that way you know this person as, you know, as this person, and not like this hawk, you know, staring at you the whole time?
Absolutely, yeah. So people will call me usually ahead of time, and once in a while I might run into them. I'm always happy to answer questions, and I think the more human we can become, maybe it sets the candidate at ease.
And I would take it further and just, you know, like you were saying about the payment or anything else, you want to know the terms of engagement before you get started. You are absolutely empowered to ask those questions and understand everything about it so you can prepare correctly. And it's not an illegal gouge to talk to the last person that examiner, you know, was testing, so that you can see some things, so long as you're not trying to get the plan of action or something, but just, you know, we all have our own personal hot spots, obviously, you know, and things we want to see, but excellent to go talk to the DPE ahead of time.
And it calms the nerves. It really does. You know, they'll ask me different questions, and, you know, what do you find toughest? Well, when I was a private pilot, it took me 3 attempts to pass my knowledge test. I kept getting better. 68, 69, 72, I finally passed it. But I'm human. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, not by any means.
But he flies helicopters. Watch out for him.
Yeah. Any helicopter people in here? Any questions? The one guy, any questions? Got it. Somebody over here? You got any questions?
The only question I have is why?
Because it's fun. I can fly backwards.
I fly upside down.
You watch Red Bull this afternoon?
I have a friend, and he says, okay, you guys in fixed wing, you just kind of point it where you want to go. We guys in helicopters, we fly.
All right,
this could be a very interesting evening around a bar sometime. But.
So I was wondering, what sort of common mistakes have you seen people make that would disqualify a cross-country flight?
Getting lost. So I get a little bit of a thing. I get a lot of different schools. I'm 100 miles south of here, but I cover northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin. Occasionally you'll see me in eastern Iowa, eastern Minnesota. But, and some people will start off at a disadvantage. They won't program the GPS. They won't set things up. I'm going to start with pilotage and go, why would you do that in real life? No, set yourself up the way you really would fly this cross country. So if you're going to use the GPS, if you're going to use your ForeFlight, whatever, set it all up. I need to check the boxes to make sure your skills and knowledge meet the ACS, and I can do that as we go. So a scenario might be we started off on this direction, but for whatever reason the screen failed on our Garmin 430, or you know, we're in an area where there's a NOTAM and the GPS has been disrupted or turned off, type of thing. So start off on the right foot. Use everything to your advantage. Make the DPE's job harder to do, you know, from that aspect of it. But I've seen people launch off and well, as much as 90 degrees off course. And I'll let it go. I'll let you go. Where are we? What's this town over here? And they talk themselves into, oh, that's Broadhead. No. But I'll ask, how do you know that's Broadhead? Well, the train track's running through it. Okay, there's train tracks there. What else? Well, there's an airport. Oh, okay. Where's the airport? I'm not feeling so good. Yeah, like right now, I'm hot and sweaty. I need a drink. And so, yeah, getting lost is probably the biggest thing. Yeah, there is a time requirement for hitting checkpoints and being close like that, but it's hard to sit there and judge unless you get out your measurement tape and do that.
So I'll add to that. So quick scenario, taking off on runway 18, the course to, say, Nashville was a course of 330. And, from the flight plan, the mark is from airport to airport, but the candidate doesn't take into consideration that we took off and we flew for, say, 4 miles to the south and then turned on a course of 330, and we would be paralleling, right? We wouldn't be on course. So the not compensating for getting back on course by maybe hitting a course of, or a heading of 340 to get back on course. So we've been flying in the general direction, but never hit any checkpoints because the candidate didn't compensate for that. So just always remember how I might need to compensate based on wind or a deviation that I might have taken by maybe flying a bit.
I got to ask the guy who asked the question, are you a CFI yet? Yeah. Well, I think people don't understand how badly some people fly. I mean, there's so many things that go so badly. One person, I let them use the icon and the pink line, and they still couldn't keep it on the pink line, and it did this, and it went up and down 300 feet, and they obviously weren't ready. I mean, failures on private pilot tests aren't nuanced usually. They're pretty big stuff. And I say to them, if you think it went wrong, I'll tell you if it went wrong, but if it goes really badly, I look at you, you look at me, and we both go, that was bad. And it's almost like you'll know yourself. But the paralleling the course, my favorite was a kid who was going on cross country, and he just did the passenger pigeon sort of departure up to 6,000 feet, and then he headed in the wrong direction. It happens. It's amazing what we see.
Question for you. How many of you guys are using ForeFlight or Garmin as your flight planning? Awesome. I like this stuff. How many people know what Garmin does or Pilot does when they're plotting across country? Do they add variation? Do they add deviation? Under what scenarios are the winds calculated in there? So when you're using that stuff, it might be a good idea because we'll ask a question. What heading are we going to fly? How did that come up? Because a lot of times if the iPad or whatever your device is isn't connected to the internet, it's not giving you an accurate heading. So being aware of that. I had a commercial applicant show up with 3 different navigation forms. One he did himself, one off of ForeFlight, and there's another one off of skyvector.com. The question I noticed was each one of those were off. The total times were off by as much as 20 minutes between the one, and I asked him which one was correct. He couldn't answer the question. Well, after we stopped the test, we took a look at it. A lot of it was his data, his performance planning that he put in ForeFlight, put in skyvector.com, and the information he took on the map. So knowing what resources you are using and its capabilities or weaknesses will help you.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, it's great to use these electronic flight bags, but you need to be a good consumer of that information. If you bring that to me, I'm going to dig a bit. I had a young lady who brought me about a year ago for an instrument exam. Long story short, asked how much fuel this flight was going to take, and she gave me this value that was just absurdly low. And so, my BS meter is going off, and so I said, okay, well, what kind of fuel flow do you see us? And this is a 195 horsepower 172. what kind of fuel flow are you seeing at cruise? And she said 5.3 gallons an hour. And I just, there is no way. Again, I'm happy to be wrong, right? So I said, let's get the performance charts out, and maybe you can justify that to me. And she didn't know how to use her performance charts. That's a problem. That's not being a good consumer of information. That's just seeing what's there and taking it face value. And through the practical exam, I'm going to make sure that you are a good consumer of that information and you can back it up yourself.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you for some really great questions. I know there are a few more out there. We're going to get pushed off the stage here very shortly. So, but thank you all for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the show. And again, one of the points that was brought out earlier, get to know your DPE. As a young flight instructor, I had a very good relationship with the DPE I used, and that paid off big dividends for me, for my students, for our flight school, for the whole aviation community in general. So go out there, get to know them. They're human. They put their pants on one leg at a time. And enjoy the rest of the show. Fly safe. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thanks.
Thank you all.